Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku was recruited by Amanda Waller to lead the Suicide Squad. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The rain was a cold, relentless hiss against the grimy concrete of the rooftop. It fell in sheets, blurring the neon glow of the city below into a bleeding watercolor of blues, reds, and yellows. For anyone else, it might have been a miserable night. For Izuku Midoriya, it was just Tuesday. He stood hunched over, a tattered specter against the stormy sky. His costume, once a vibrant symbol of hope modeled after the greatest hero the world had ever known, was now a ragged patchwork of scorched fabric, hastily stitched repairs, and the deep, dark stains of his own blood. The iconic cowl, meant to evoke a smiling victory, was torn and frayed, hanging limply around his neck. Only the dull gleam of his iron-soled boots and the battered steel of his gauntlets spoke of their original purpose. Exhaustion was a physical weight, a leaden cloak that threatened to drag him to his knees. Every muscle fiber screamed in protest. His bones felt like they were humming with a low-grade, agonizing frequency. The price of using one for all at a level his body was still, after everything, not quite ready for. The green lightning of his quirk, once a dazzling display of power, now felt like a swarm of angry hornets under his skin, a constant, jittery reminder of the borrowed power thrumming through his veins. Below, the sirens had finally faded. He'd just finished 3 low-level villains with enhancement quirks, preying on a district already weakened by the war. It should have been easy, but easy didn't exist for him anymore. He wasn't just fighting villains, he was fighting the clock, fighting his own fatigue, fighting the whispers of all for one that sometimes slithered into the quiet moments. He was a ghost, haunting the edges of the society he had sworn to protect, ensuring the danger never got close to the people he loved. Uraraka, Ida, Kaken, their faces swam in his mind's eye, a painful reminder of the life he'd abandoned. He could almost hear their voices, imagine their worried expressions. That was why he was out here, to keep that worry from ever becoming a eulogy. The thought was a bitter pill, but it was the only thing that kept him moving. He was the target. As long as he was alone, they were safe. He coughed, a racking, painful motion that sent a jolt through his ribs. He tasted copper. His danger sense, which had been screaming for the past hour, had finally settled into a dull, throbbing ache behind his eyes. The immediate threat was gone, or so he thought. It started as a subtle shift in the air pressure, a change in the rhythm of the falling rain. His danger sense didn't scream. It pricked at his consciousness, a sharp, cold needle of pure wrongness. It wasn't the familiar spike of a villain's bloodlust. This was something else. Clinical. Controlled. He pushed himself upright, his body protesting every inch of the movement. He scanned the bruised purple sky, his eyes narrowing. Then he saw it, a black shape, solid and absolute, resolving out of the low-hanging clouds. It made almost no sound, its rotors cutting through the air with a low, predatory whump-whump-whump that was more felt than heard. A helicopter. Sleek, angular, and matte black, absorbing the city lights rather than reflecting them. It bore no markings, no call signs, nothing to identify it. This wasn't news media. This wasn't the police. Izuku's exhaustion was instantly burned away by a fresh surge of adrenaline. He dropped into a low crouch, the green lightning of one for all flaring to life around him, crackling from his fingertips. Black whip tendrils, dark as squid ink, uncoiled from his arms, tasting the air like sentient snakes. He was a cornered animal, ready to spring. The helicopter didn't circle. It moved with unnerving precision, its landing gear deploying as it settled onto the far side of the wide, flat rooftop. The downwash was a hurricane, kicking up gravel and rainwater in a stinging spray. 2 side doors slid open simultaneously. From each, 4 figures rappelled to the ground with a fluid efficiency that spoke of endless drills. They were clad in black tactical gear, featureless helmets hiding their faces, and they carried rifles that looked far more advanced than standard military issue. They fanned out, creating a perimeter, their movements economical and silent. They didn't aim at him, not yet, but their posture was a clear message of containment. Then, from the main cabin, a final figure descended. She used no rope. A small platform lowered her to the ground with a quiet hydraulic hiss. She was a short, stout woman in a severe, dark blue business suit. She held a tablet in one hand and was utterly unfazed by the wind and rain that plastered her graying hair to her scalp. She walked forward, her sensible heels clicking on the wet concrete, stopping a respectful 20 feet from him. The armed soldiers moved with her, a phalanx of silent guards. Her face was a mask of stern indifference. Her eyes, small and dark, held no fear, no awe, no excitement. They were the eyes of a tax auditor or a mortician, someone who dealt in cold, hard facts. She looked at the crackling green energy enveloping him, the writhing black tendrils, and the sheer, raw power radiating from his small frame, and her expression didn't change one iota. She was utterly, terrifyingly unimpressed. "Izuku Midoriya," she said. Her voice was flat, devoid of accent, but it carried over the thrum of the helicopter rotors with perfect clarity. "Quirk, currently designated superpower, unofficially known as One for All. You've been a difficult man to pin down." Izuku's blood ran cold. She knew. She knew the name. The Hero Public Safety Commission knew, Nisa knew, his mentors knew. But this woman? She was from no organization he recognized. "Who are you?" he rasped, his voice raw. The words scraped his throat. Blackwhip tensed, the tips quivering inches from the ground. "How do you know that name?" "My name is Amanda Waller," she stated, as if announcing the time. "As for how I know, it's my business to know things. I know, for example, that you are currently running on less than 3 hours of sleep over the past 48. I know you've consumed approximately 1,200 calories in that same time, mostly from convenience store protein bars. And I know that the sixth user of your quirk, a man named N, possessed the quirk smokescreen, which you have yet to manifest. I know a great many things, Mr. Midoriya." Every word was a hammer blow against his defenses. This went beyond simple surveillance. This was a deep, invasive intelligence that stripped him bare. He felt a flicker of panic. If she knew all that, what else did she know? Did she know about his friends? His mother? "Stay away from them," he growled, the threat rolling out with a surge of emerald lightning. The concrete beneath his feet cracked. Waller didn't flinch. A predictable response. "Heroism 101. Always protect others. It's your greatest strength." She took a deliberate step forward, and her soldiers' rifles twitched, but she raised a hand to placate them. "It is also your most exploitable weakness," she tapped her tablet. "I've read your notebooks. All 13 of them, plus the supplemental analyses on your classmates. Fascinating reading. The level of detail, the tactical foresight, the sheer analytical prowess. You don't just have the mind of a hero, son. You have the mind of a general. You see the battlefield in angles and probabilities. You calculate weaknesses and exploit them with ruthless efficiency. Your fight against Lady Nagant was a masterclass in psychological and environmental warfare." He recoiled as if struck. His notebooks. His private, obsessive, mumbled-over notebooks. They were his soul laid bare on paper. "You have no right," he choked out. "Rights are privileges granted by those in power," Waller said, her voice dropping a fraction, gaining a harder edge. "I am in power. Now your idealism, that's another matter. This crusade of yours, this self-imposed exile? It's strategically unsound. You're isolating your strength, burning yourself out fighting street-level thugs while the real monsters consolidate their power. It's noble, stupid, and utterly unsustainable. You think you're protecting your friends by running away, but all you're doing is making yourself a more manageable target." A cold dread began to pool in Izuku's stomach, heavier than any exhaustion. This woman wasn't here to arrest him. She wasn't here to fight him. She was here to dissect him. "What do you want?" he demanded, trying to regain some semblance of control. "I want to offer you a job," she said simply. "A position has opened up. I need a new field leader for a special operations unit. One who can think on their feet, command respect through action, and adapt to impossible situations. Your profile, despite your sentimental flaws, is a near-perfect match." Izuku stared at her, dumbfounded. The sheer absurdity of it was staggering. "A job? I'm a hero. I work with heroes. I don't work for whatever this is. No, you were a hero in training. Waller corrected him, her tone sharp and precise. Right now, you are a vigilante operating outside the law, causing significant property damage, and actively evading the directives of Japan's legally sanctioned hero agencies. You are, by definition, a criminal. A very powerful one. She let that hang in the air for a moment. And the people I work with? They aren't heroes. Heroes are constrained by laws, by public opinion, by a need to be good. They wait for disaster to strike, then they clean up the mess. My unit, we stop the disaster before it happens. We operate in the dark, in the moral gray, where the real work gets done. Izuku felt a wave of revulsion. You're talking about killing people. I'm talking about results. She shot back. Something your world's so-called symbol of peace failed to deliver in the end. All Might punched his way through problems. He never solved them. He swept the dirt under the rug, and now you're drowning in it. Look at your society. It was a house of cards built on one man's smile, and it collapsed the second he frowned. The insult to All Might was a raw nerve. A furious roar built in Izuku's chest. Don't you dare talk about him! He snarled, taking a step forward. Green power exploded around him, and Black Whip lashed out, cracking like a whip just feet from her face. The Argus soldiers snapped their rifles up, laser sights painting a dozen red dots on his chest. Waller didn't even blink. That is the sentimentality I'm talking about, she said, her voice dangerously quiet. That is the weakness. Anger. Attachment. It makes you predictable. She gestured to the city below. While you're out here, playing boogeyman to purse snatchers, a genuine crisis is brewing. A meta-destabilizing event. Do you know what a Brother Eye protocol is, Mr. Midoriya? It's a surveillance satellite AI, designed by a very paranoid man from a world much like your own, tasked with monitoring metahuman activity. A piece of it, its core logic, has found its way into your world's network. It's dormant for now. But it's learning. Watching. It has seen your war, your societal collapse, and it has concluded that quirks are an existential threat to planetary stability. Her words painted a horrifying picture. An AI with the power to monitor everyone, judging them. The Justice League, my counterparts in this reality, they can't touch it. Waller continued, her tone clinical. It's hidden behind layers of international corporate firewalls. Any overt move by a government-sanctioned hero team would be seen as an act of cyber warfare. It would cause panic, political fallout, chaos. They are, as usual, paralyzed by their own rules. Izuku's mind was racing, connecting dots, processing the threat. It was exactly the kind of invisible, insidious danger that pro-heroes were ill-equipped to handle. So you want me to, what? Punch a satellite? A flicker of something, not quite amusement, but close, passed over Waller's face. No. I want you to lead a team to the server farm in Corto Maltese where its primary consciousness is beginning to coalesce. I want you to infiltrate the facility and physically destroy its hardware before it achieves full sentience and links with global military systems. It's a black op dirty. No witnesses, no survivors, if necessary. The cold finality of her words made him sick. No. I won't. I don't kill. There's always another way, is there? Waller's voice was laced with steel. Was there another way with Tamura Shigaraki? If you had the chance, right at the start, to end him before he murdered thousands, would you have taken it? Your idealism is a luxury you can no longer afford, boy. He opened his mouth to argue, to scream that she was wrong, that there was always hope, always a chance for salvation. But the words died in his throat. The memory of the war, of the bodies, of Nightie's dying words, rose up to choke him. Seeing his hesitation, Waller pressed her advantage. She knew she had him on the ropes. Now came the knockout blow. I had hoped your strategic mind would see the logic, she said, a hint of mock disappointment in her tone. But you're still thinking like a hero. So let me rephrase the offer in terms you'll understand. A threat and a promise. She swiped a finger across her tablet and turned the screen toward him. It was a classified intelligence document, stamped with the logos of a dozen international security agencies, the HPSC, CIA, MI6. The title read, Project Chimera, An assessment of UA High's Quirk Singularity Program. His heart stopped. He saw dossiers. Photos of his classmates. Uraraka, smiling during a training exercise. Ida, adjusting his glasses, looking stern. Todoroki, a quiet intensity in his mismatched eyes. Bakugo, snarling at the camera during the sports festival. Page after page of his friends, his family. What is this? He whispered, his voice trembling. It's a narrative, Waller said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial murmur. A very convincing one. It details a secret, illegal program at UA High School, spearheaded by the principal, Nizu, designed to artificially cultivate a quirk singularity weapon, a living vessel capable of holding multiple quirks, intended as a deterrent in a post-All Might world. She scrolled down, showing him fabricated emails between Nizu and All Might, doctored financial records funneling funds into a special project, and a final, chilling analysis that concluded that Izuku Midoriya was the result of this program, and that his classmates in 1A were a combination of handlers, potential successors, and secondary experiments. It's fake, Izuku breathed, horrified. It's all lies. Of course it is, Waller agreed smoothly. But it's plausible. And in my world, the plausible is more dangerous than the truth. All I have to do is leak this file. Not to the press, nothing so clumsy. I'll leak it to the right people. Paranoid generals in the American military who see a new arms race. Ambitious politicians in the European Union looking to make a name for themselves. The remnants of your own hero commission, desperate to re-establish control and find a scapegoat for their failures. She looked up from the tablet, her dark eyes locking onto his. The cold indifference was gone, replaced by the predatory gleam of a shark that has scented blood. They won't arrest your friends, Mr. Midoriya. Arrests are messy. They create martyrs. No. They will see them as threats to be neutralized. Quietly. A training accident. A villain attack that went wrong. A transport that disappears over the Pacific. There are 1,000 ways for a promising young hero to die tragically. You will be shut down, branded a terrorist training camp. Your teachers will be imprisoned. Your mother will be taken for questioning and never seen again. Everyone you have ever cared about will be erased. Wiped from the board, all to contain a threat that you, their supposed protector, led right to their doorstep. The world tilted on its axis. The rain, the wind, the thrum of the helicopter, it all faded into a deafening roar in his ears. This was a checkmate he hadn't even seen being set up. He couldn't fight her. If he attacked, it would only prove her point about him being an unstable weapon. If he ran, she would leak the file. If he went to his friends to warn them, he would be leading the wolves to the flock. He was trapped. Utterly and completely. A cage not of steel, but of love and responsibility. He looked at the faces on the tablet again. Achiko's bright, determined eyes. Tenya's unwavering earnestness. Shoto's quiet strength. Kaken's explosive, defiant pride. He had left them to keep them safe, and in doing so, had left them vulnerable to a kind of evil he had never imagined. An evil that didn't wear a mask or monologue about destruction. An evil that wore a business suit and wielded information like a scalpel. Tears mingled with the rain on his face, hot trails on his cold skin. The green lightning sputtered and died. The black whip tendrils dissolved into nothingness. His shoulders, which had borne the weight of 8 quirks and the hope of the world, finally slumped in defeat. The vestiges were silent. There was no advice they could offer here. This wasn't a battle of fists, but of principles. And he was being forced to sacrifice his own to save the people who had helped him build them. What do you want me to do? He asked, the words tasting like ash. Waller's expression remained impassive, but there was a deep, chilling satisfaction in her eyes. The satisfaction of a master strategist whose gambit had paid off perfectly. You will come with me, she said. You will serve as the field leader of my Task Force X. You will follow my orders without question. You will complete your missions by any means necessary. You will be my weapon. In exchange. She tapped her tablet, and the screen went dark. This file gets buried in a vault so deep no one will ever find it. I will personally ensure that any and all scrutiny of UA High and its students is redirected. I will become their shield in the shadows. They will be safe. They will get to graduate, become heroes, live their lives, and they will never, ever know the price you paid for it. It was the devil's bargain, plain and simple. His soul for their safety. His dream for theirs. He thought of All Might's smiling face, his booming declaration that he, Izuku Midoriya, could become a hero. What would his mentor think of him now, collaborating with a monster like Waller, leading a team of killers, abandoning every ideal he had ever held dear? Then he thought of Uraraka laughing, and the choice was no longer a choice. It was an inevitability. He would desecrate All Might's memory to keep her safe. He would become a villain in his own story to ensure she got a happy ending. Slowly, painfully, he raised his head. He met Amanda Waller's unwavering gaze. The fire in his eyes was gone, replaced by a bleak, hollow emptiness. The look of a soldier accepting a suicide mission. Yes, he said. The word was a ghost of a sound, almost stolen by the wind. I'll do it. I thought you might see it my way, Waller said. She turned and walked back toward the helicopter, the silent platform already descending for her. Your equipment will be stored. You'll be issued a new uniform. Welcome to the team, Midoriya. One of the Argus soldiers gestured with his rifle for Izuku to move. He walked, his movements stiff and mechanical, like a puppet whose strings had just been cut. He didn't look back at the city. There was nothing left for him there. As he stepped onto the helicopter's ramp, the soldier beside him produced a small, menacing-looking medical device. Hold still, the man grunted. Neck injection. Izuku flinched, but didn't resist. He felt a sharp, cold sting in the side of his neck. What was that? He asked, his voice flat. Waller's voice came from inside the dark cabin. Insurance. A nanite explosive. You disobey a direct order, you try to run, you do anything I don't sanction, and I press a button. She held up a small detonator, a single red button gleaming on its surface. Your head pops off. Try not to test me. The cleanup is a hassle. The metal ramp hissed shut, sealing him inside the belly of the beast. The helicopter lifted off, the city lights of Muzdalifa shrinking below. He was leaving his home, his world, his dream, all of it falling away into the rain-swept darkness. He stared at his hands, at the scars that crisscrossed his fingers and palms. They were the hands of a hero, hands that saved people. Now, they belonged to Amanda Waller. He was no longer a symbol. He was no longer a student. He was no longer Deku. He was a weapon. An asset. A tool. And Amanda Waller held the trigger. The journey from Muzdalifa had been a silent, jarring affair. Izuku had sat strapped into a hardback seat, the cold prickle of the nanite injection site a constant, terrifying reminder of his new reality. The Argus soldiers ignored him, their featureless helmets turning him into a non-person, an object being transported. He had tried to analyze them, to find weaknesses in their gear or procedure, but his mind felt sluggish, thick with despair. For the first time since he was 4 years old, Izuku Midoriya had no plan. He was simply cargo. Hours bled into a timeless gray. When the helicopter finally descended, it wasn't to a gleaming high-tech facility or a hidden military base. The air that flooded the cabin as the ramp lowered was thick, humid, and smelled of swamp water and institutional decay. He stepped out onto a cracked concrete landing pad surrounded by a towering, electrified fence. Beyond it lay a sprawling complex of grim, brutalist buildings, all stained concrete and rusted steel, nestled uncomfortably within a murky, cypress-choked bayou. Searchlights swept across the grounds, their beams cutting through the heavy mist like ghostly fingers. The only sounds were the chirp of unseen insects and the distant, mournful cry of a lone bird. A sign, faded and peeling, was bolted to the main gate. It read, Belle Reve Penitentiary. Underneath, in stark red letters, Special Security Barracks. This wasn't a headquarters. This was a prison. His new home. The contrast with Yui was a physical blow. Yui was a monument to hope, all gleaming glass and soaring architecture, designed to inspire. Its grounds were green and open, echoing with the laughter and shouts of the next generation of heroes. This place was designed to crush the human spirit. It was a concrete tomb, built to contain monsters. And now, he was one of its residents. 2 guards, their faces hard and humorless, flanked him. "Move it!" one grunted, prodding him forward. He was led through a series of sterile, fluorescent-lit corridors. The air inside was even worse, a cloying mix of industrial cleaner, stale sweat, and a low, metallic tang he couldn't identify. It was the smell of hopelessness. Every 10 feet, a camera swiveled to track his movement. Heavy steel doors slid open with a deafening clang and slammed shut behind him, each one a nail in the coffin of his old life. They didn't take him to a cell. Instead, they led him to a large, circular room in the heart of the facility. It was as sterile and gray as the rest of the prison, with a single large, round table in the center. There were no windows. The only exit was the one he'd just come through. The far wall was a massive, darkened screen. Amanda Waller stood waiting for him, looking as severe and unyielding as she had on the rooftop. She held the same tablet, her expression one of cold appraisal. "Welcome to Bel Reve, Mr. Midoriya," she said, her voice echoing slightly in the Spartan room. "This will be your briefing room, your training hall, and for the foreseeable future, your entire world. Get used to it." Izuku said nothing. He just stood there, a ghost in his own life, his torn vigilante costume a pathetic reminder of the hero he had tried to be. "First, the rules," Waller began, pacing slowly around the table. "They are simple, so I expect you to grasp them quickly. Rule 1, you belong to me. Your power, your strategic mind, your life, they are all assets at my disposal. Rule 2, you will obey my orders instantly and without question. My voice will be piped directly into your comms in the field. It is the voice of God. The only one you will answer to." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "Rule 3, and this is the most important for your particular disposition, you are not here to be a hero. The individuals you are about to meet are not your friends. They are not your teammates. They are expendable assets. Murderers, thieves, and psychopaths. Your job is not to save them. Your job is to point them at the target and ensure they complete the mission. Their survival is, at best, a tertiary concern. Mission success is all that matters." The words were like acid, eating away at the very core of his being. Not to save them. How could he do that? Every instinct he had, every lesson All Might had ever taught him, screamed in protest. Waller saw the conflict in his eyes. "Struggle with it on your own time," she said dismissively. "While you are on my clock, you are a commander, and your success," she added, her voice dropping to a low, menacing tone, "is directly tied to the continued safety and anonymity of a certain group of high school students in Muzudafu, Japan. Do we have an understanding?" Izuku's jaw clenched. He gave a single, jerky nod. The lie tasted like bile in his throat. "Good," Waller said, a flicker of grim satisfaction on her face. "Then let's meet the team." She tapped her tablet. "Bring them in." The heavy steel door slid open with a groan. The first to enter was a woman with blonde hair and pigtails, dyed pink and blue at the tips. She wore a bright red and black tactical outfit with "Daddy's Lil' Monster" scrawled across her t-shirt. She carried a baseball bat emblazoned with the words, "Good night," over her shoulder and chewed gum with an obnoxious smack. A wide, manic grin was plastered on her face, but her eyes, sharp, intelligent, and deeply unhinged, darted around the room, taking in every detail, lingering on Izuku with unnerving intensity. "Ooh, a new toy!" she chirped, her voice a high, sing-songy thing. "Hiya, Waller! You didn't tell me we were getting a little green bean for show and tell." "Quinn," Waller said, her tone flat. "Behave." The woman, Quinn, bounced on the balls of her feet and sauntered over to Izuku, circling him like a shark. She leaned in close, sniffing the air around him. "Smells like angst ozone and poor life choices. I like him." She poked his cheek with a gloved finger. It was surprisingly soft. "What's your deal, shortcake? You look like a Power Ranger who lost a fight with a lawnmower." Izuku flinched back, his body tense. This was Harley Quinn. He'd seen her file in passing during a joint hero agency briefing. Psychiatrist turned homicidal maniac, the Joker's former paramour. A genius-level intellect wrapped in a layer of pure chaos. Before he could respond, the next member entered. He was a tall, lean man with a shaved head and a world-weary expression. He moved with an economy of motion that spoke of supreme confidence and lethal purpose. He wore a padded combat suit, and a ballistic mask with a red targeting eye was pushed up on his forehead. He ignored everyone, walking directly to a spot against the wall where he began meticulously field stripping and cleaning a pair of wrist-mounted cannons. "Lawton," Waller acknowledged. Floyd Lawton, dead shot, didn't look up. "Waller, you got a job, or are we just here for the freak show?" His voice was a low, professional rumble. His eyes flicked to Izuku for a fraction of a second, sizing him up, and then dismissed him. The look was clear: "You're a kid. You're a liability." Next came a walking mountain. The figure had to duck to get through the doorway. It was a man, or at least man-shaped, but with the head and gray, leathery skin of a great white shark. It stood easily 7 feet tall, a behemoth of pure muscle wearing nothing but a pair of reinforced shorts. Its eyes were black, beady, and utterly devoid of anything resembling higher thought. It lumbered into the room, its massive feet thudding on the floor. It sniffed the air, its gaze fixing on Izuku's hand. "Hand!" It rumbled, the voice a deep, guttural sound from the bottom of the ocean. It pointed a thick, 3-fingered claw at Izuku. "Snack?" Izuku froze, a primal fear seizing him. This was King Shark. No. A demigod, some files claimed. A cannibalistic monster, all of them agreed. The sheer predatory presence he radiated was overwhelming, making even the most fearsome Nomas seem like a puppet. No, Waller said, her voice sharp. "He is not a snack. He is the leader." King Shark stared blankly for a moment, a low growl rumbling in his chest. "Leader, snack?" "No," Waller repeated, with a sliver of annoyance. He seemed to accept this, for now, and waddled over to a corner, sitting with a heavy thud that shook the room. The fourth man was a scruffy, foul-looking individual in a worn beanie and a shearling coat, reeking of stale beer and body odor. He carried a canvas bag filled with what looked like high-tech boomerangs. He strutted in, a sneer plastered on his face, and immediately began scanning the room for anything worth stealing. "Well, look at this bunch of misfits," he said in a thick Australian accent. "Another day in paradise, Wallaby?" He spat on the floor. "And who's the pipsqueak? Did we pick up a mascot from the local comic convention? What's with the bunny ears, mate? Captain Boomerang? Digger Harkness. A petty thief with a gimmick, but a vicious and surprisingly dangerous one." He was everything Izuku had been taught to despise: selfish, crude, and utterly without honor. The final member entered so quietly Izuku almost didn't notice her. She was a young woman, probably not much older than him, with tired eyes and a perpetually worried expression. She wore a baggy coat over a simple jumpsuit, and clutched a long, metallic device in her hands. A small, sleek brown rat was perched on her shoulder, its whiskers twitching. She kept her head down, avoiding eye contact with everyone, and shuffled to the furthest part of the room, making herself as small as possible. Cleo Keizo. Ratcatcher 2. A bank robber who could control rats. She looked less like a supervillain and more like a scared kid who had fallen in with the wrong crowd. A flicker of his old self, the self that wanted to reach out and say "It's okay, I'm here to help," sparked in his chest. He ruthlessly crushed it. Waller's words echoed in his head: "They are not your friends. This is your new team," Waller announced to the room. "Task Force X. And this," she gestured to Izuku, "is your new field leader." A beat of stunned silence, and then the room erupted. Harley Quinn let out a peal of delighted, insane laughter. "Him? Oh, Waller, you've really lost it this time. This is gonna be better than therapy." Deadshot finally stopped cleaning his weapon, his gaze fixing on Izuku with cold, hard skepticism. "You're putting a kid in charge? A kid who looks like he's about to cry. He'll get us all killed." "Agreed," Captain Boomerang sneered, stepping forward. "I ain't taking orders from some snot-nosed little hero. What are you gonna do, Kermit? Lecture us to death?" He swaggered right up to Izuku, puffing out his chest. He was trying to get a rise out of him, to test his limits, to establish dominance in this pack of wolves. Izuku stood his ground, his fists clenched at his sides. He remembered his training with Aizawa, the de-escalation tactics, the importance of projecting calm authority. "We don't have to be friends," Izuku said, his voice quiet but steady. "But we have to work together to survive. I need you to just listen to the plan." Boomerang barked a laugh. "Listen to the plan? Here's my plan, mate." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper laced with malice. "I'm gonna get out of this hellhole, and if that means one of you lot, or even the little green baby, has to take a rang to the back of the head as a distraction, so be it." He looked over Izuku's shoulder, his nasty gaze landing on Cleo. "Or maybe I'll just borrow the rat girl's little toy. Bet I could cause some real mayhem with that." That was it. The line. Threatening someone who was clearly terrified, someone who was cowering in the corner. The hero in Izuku roared to life, but it wasn't a hero who acted. It was something colder. More efficient. "That's enough," Izuku said, his voice losing its pleading tone and gaining a hard, flat edge. "Or what?" Boomerang taunted, shoving a finger into Izuku's chest. "You gonna tell your mommy on me?" It happened in less than a second. Izuku didn't yell. He didn't power up with a brilliant flash. He used FA gene, storing kinetic energy in his legs with a few imperceptible muscle twitches. Then he released it. He moved. He wasn't a blur of green lightning. He was simply not there one moment, and everywhere the next. His first target was Deadshot. The assassin, sensing the shift in the room, had already begun to lower his targeting monocle, his hands moving toward his wrist cannons. Before his finger could even brush the trigger, Izuku was there. He didn't throw a punch. He delivered a precise, open-handed strike to Lawton's wrist, a Shuto strike, sharp and perfect. It wasn't hard enough to break bone, but the impact was shocking, sending a jolt of numb pain up Lawton's arm. His hand spasmed open, the cleaning rod clattering to the floor. Simultaneously, a single tendril of black whip, thin as a wire, shot out and wrapped around the wrist cannon on the opposite arm, yanking it just enough to misalign his aim. Deadshot froze, his visible eye wide with shock. He hadn't just been disarmed. He had been outmaneuvered. The kid was fast. Impossibly fast. In the same fluid motion, Izuku pivoted. Boomerang was still mid-sneer, his brain not yet having processed that Izuku was no longer in front of him. Izuku didn't hit him. He cupped his hand and flicked the air an inch from the Australian's ear. It was a miniature, hyper-focused Delaware smash, barely 5% of his power. The result was a shotgun blast of compressed air. It caught Boomerang on the side of the head. His eyes went wide, the world spun, and he was thrown sideways as if hit by a speeding car. He crashed into the concrete wall with a sickening thump and slid to the floor in a groaning, dazed heap. One of his boomerangs fell from his coat and clattered on the ground. The room fell dead silent. The only sounds were Boomerang's moans and the frantic, tiny scratching of Sebastian the rat, who had hidden inside Cleo's collar. Izuku was now in the center of the room, standing in a low combat stance. A faint wisp of green steam rose from his fingers. The soft, sad boy from a moment ago was gone. In his place stood a figure of coiled, dangerous energy. His eyes, usually wide and full of emotion, were now cold and focused. They swept over the remaining members of the squad, pinning each of them in turn. He looked at Harley, whose manic grin had been replaced by a look of wide-eyed, fascinated appraisal. He looked at King Shark, who had stopped his low rumbling and was now watching him with a flicker of something other than hunger, confusion, maybe even a sliver of caution. He looked at Ratcatcher too, who was staring at him from behind her curtain of hair, her fear now mingled with awe. Finally, his gaze returned to Deadshot. The professional assassin slowly, deliberately, raised his hands in a gesture of placation, his eyes never leaving Izuku's. The message was clear. "I see you. I was wrong. We are done," Izuku said, his voice low and absolute. It wasn't a request. It was an order. He stood there for a long moment, letting his authority settle over the room like a physical weight. He had used his power not to save, but to control. He had inflicted pain not to stop a villain, but to establish a pecking order. And the worst part? It had worked. A slow, deliberate clap echoed through the silent room. It was Amanda Waller. She hadn't moved an inch, her expression as unreadable as ever. "Impressive," she said, the word dripping with dry approval. Perhaps there's a commander in you yet, Mr. Midoriya. The tension in Izuku's shoulders eased, but only by a fraction. The cold reality of what he had just done washed over him. He had acted like them. He had used violence and intimidation as a first resort. A piece of his soul, a small piece of the boy who had cried watching All Might save people on the internet, had just withered and died on the floor of this gray room. Before anyone else could speak, a sharp tone blared from hidden speakers in the ceiling, making them all jump. Waller looked down at her tablet. Well, she said, her voice devoid of any warmth. It seems playtime is over. Her voice, cold and authoritative, filled the room, cutting through the lingering tension like a guillotine. Glad you're all acquainted. She looked up from her tablet, her gaze sweeping over them, a general surveying her mismatched, broken soldiers. Your first mission starts in 5 minutes. The inside of the VTOL jet was a cacophony of competing energies. The high-pitched whine of the engines was a constant drone, a sound that grated on Izuku's already frayed nerves. He stood at the head of a small, holographic table, a three-dimensional map of their target glowing a sickly green in the cramped cabin. The image depicted an ancient, dilapidated ziggurat, swallowed by the Louisiana bayou, its stone weathered and covered in thick veils of Spanish moss. The target is a repurposed pre-Columbian temple, Izuku began, his voice tight but clear over the engine noise. He pointed to a blinking red dot in the heart of the structure. Intelligence suggests the Cobra cult is using the central sacrificial chamber to house a server farm. They've downloaded a significant amount of data from a compromised source, including the chemical formula and distribution plans for a weaponized neurotoxin. Our objective is to infiltrate the temple, secure the primary data drive, and extract before their main force can mobilize. He tried to channel the authoritative calm of Aizawa, the confident presence of All Might. It felt like wearing a suit 3 sizes too big. Harley Quinn was swinging her legs from her seat, humming a jaunty, off-key tune and cleaning her teeth with the tip of a Bowie knife. Captain Boomerang was chugging a stolen can of beer he'd somehow smuggled aboard, letting out a loud belch. King Shark was staring intently at his own massive hand, as if contemplating its mysteries. Only Deadshot and Ratcatcher 2 seemed to be paying any attention. Deadshot was methodically loading custom rounds into a series of magazines, his movements economical and precise, but his eyes were on the holographic map. Cleo, with her rat Sebastian perched nervously on her lap, was watching Izuku with a wide, anxious gaze. Izuku swallowed, forcing himself to continue. This is a stealth mission. I've mapped out Cobra's patrol routes and guard rotations. The temple is old, full of structural weaknesses. Phase 1, Deadshot, you'll take a sniper position on this northern ridge. He highlighted a rocky outcrop overlooking the temple. You'll provide overwatch and take out their comms tower with a subsonic round. No alarms, Deadshot grunted, not looking up. Easy. Phase 2, the rest of us will approach from the south, using the swamp as cover. There's a submerged entrance to the lower catacombs here. Izuku indicated a spot at the ziggurat's base. Ratcatcher, I need you to send Sebastian ahead to scout for pressure plates or sonic traps. Boomerang, Harley, you're with me. We move through the catacombs to the central staircase. Minimal engagement, non-lethal takedowns only. We are ghosts. In and out before they know we're there. Harley stopped humming. Boring, she whined, flopping her head back against the bulkhead. Where's the fun in being a ghost? I want to make an entrance. I've got a brand new joke about a priest and a rabbi walking into a snake pit, and it's a real killer. There will be no jokes and no killing, Izuku said, his voice sharper than he intended. Boomerang snorted, crushing the beer can in his fist. You hear that, Nano? The little leprechaun says no snacks for you. Better fill up on breadsticks, mate. King Shark turned his head slowly, his black, depthless eyes fixing on Izuku. No snacks? He rumbled, a note of genuine confusion and disappointment in his deep voice. The mission comes first, Izuku insisted, his frustration mounting. If we go in loud, we'll be facing their entire garrison, including their elite Naga shock troopers. We'll be pinned down and overwhelmed. My plan minimizes risk for everyone. Your plan sounds like a good way to get shot in the back in a dark hallway, Deadshot said coolly, snapping a magazine into place. Simpler way. I put a bullet in the high priest from a click out, they panic, we waltz in and take the drive during the confusion. That's not the objective, Izuku countered, shaking his head. The objective is the drive, with 0 Cobra casualties if possible. We're not assassins. A cold, humorless chuckle came from the VTOL's internal comms. It was Waller. Cute, Midoriya. But Lawton has a point. Your idealism is a tactical liability. However, she continued, this is your test. The mission is as you stated, retrieve the drive. I'm giving you the leash. Let's see if you can command your dogs, or if they devour you. Waller out. The comm crackled into silence. The atmosphere in the cabin grew thick with resentment and skepticism. Izuku felt a hot flush of shame and anger. She was setting him up to fail. She wanted to see him break. She wanted him to give the order for Deadshot to take the shot. No, he thought, his jaw tightening. I won't. I'll prove her wrong. I'll prove there's another way. My plan stands, he said, his voice ringing with a conviction he didn't feel. We do it my way. Boomerang rolled his eyes. Harley blew a massive pink bubble that popped with a loud smack. Deadshot simply went back to his weapons. The green light above the ramp flashed. They were 5 minutes from the drop zone. Izuku's heart hammered against his ribs. This wasn't a training exercise. There was no Aizawa to erase his quirk if he lost control, no recovery girl to patch him up. There was only him, a team of killers, and a mission that was already falling apart before it had even begun. The Louisiana swamp was a living entity. The air was so thick with humidity it felt like breathing water. Insects buzzed in a constant, feverish cloud around their heads, and the dark, murky water lapped at the edges of the cypress roots they used for cover. The stench of decay was everywhere. Izuku moved with a practiced silence, his iron-soled boots making barely a whisper on the damp earth. He'd left his gauntlets and mask on the VTOL, opting for a lighter, stealthier loadout. The ragged cowl of his suit felt heavy around his neck. Behind him, Ratcatcher 2 followed, her movements almost as quiet as his own. Boomerang and Harley, however, moved with all the subtlety of a herd of elephants, splashing through puddles and complaining in loud whispers. This place gives me the creeps, Harley muttered, slapping a mosquito on her arm. Reminds me of Arkham's plumbing. Hey, Digger, I'd bet you $5 I can hit that gator over there with my bat. Shut up, Boomerang hissed back. And don't call me Digger. And make it 10. You'll miss. Both of you, silence, Izuku commanded through their comms, his voice a sharp whisper. He could feel his danger sense tingling, a low hum of ambient threat from the temple ahead. It loomed out of the mist, a dark monolith of ancient stone, serpents carved into every surface. Deadshot, are you in position? Affirmative. Lawton's voice crackled back, calm and professional. I have the comms tower in my sights. It's an old satellite dish. Easy shot. I've got eyes on 4 guards patrolling the upper tier, standard body armor, carrying assault rifles. Amateurs, do not engage unless I give the order, Izuku reminded him. Just comms, you're the boss, kid. For now. Izuku grit his teeth and pushed forward. They reached the submerged entrance, a dark, algae-choked hole in the ziggurat's foundation. It smelled like stagnant water and death. All right, Cleo, Izuku said, his voice softening as he turned to Ratcatcher 2. She flinched at being addressed directly. It's your turn. Can you send Sebastian in to check for traps? She nodded mutely, her eyes wide with fear. She knelt down and whispered to the rat on her shoulder. Sebastian chittered, then scurried off her arm and dove into the dark water with a small splash. For a long, tense minute, there was silence. Izuku could feel the impatience radiating from Boomerang. Then, a series of sharp squeaks echoed from inside the tunnel. Cleo's brow furrowed in concentration. He says, there's a pressure plate just inside the entrance, connected to a poison dart mechanism, and further in, a tripwire. But there's a high ledge he can climb to bypass them. Izuku felt a surge of relief. Good work, Cleo. Excellent. He offered her a small, encouraging smile. She looked startled, then quickly looked away, a faint blush on her cheeks. Okay, new plan, Izuku whispered to the group. We use Black Whip to get to that ledge. I'll go first and secure a line. One at a time. Quietly, he was about to summon a tendril when a loud, melodic crash followed by a cacophony of electronic screeching and shattering glass echoed from deep within the temple. Izuku froze, his blood turning to ice. What was that? He hissed into his comm. Harley's voice came back, bubbling with manic glee. Oops. I saw a jukebox. One of those cool old ones. It was playing this really awful elevator music, so I thought it needed some percussive maintenance. Did you know my bat is a pretty good conductor? There are sparks everywhere. It's so pretty. On the other end of the comm, Deadshot swore. Alarms! The whole place is lighting up like a Christmas tree. Guards are swarming the east wing where Quinn is. The 4 on the upper tier are moving to her position. Wallaby, you idiot! Boomerang snarled at Harley. The plan is shot. Izuku muttered, his mind racing, processing the new, catastrophic data. Stealth was gone. The element of surprise was gone. His meticulous, casualty-free plan had just been incinerated by a woman with a baseball bat and a short attention span. For a single, paralyzing moment, he felt the crushing weight of failure. Waller's mocking voice echoed in his head. Let's see if you can command your dogs. Then, another voice, deeper and more powerful, cut through the panic. All mights. A hero's job is to risk his life to turn his promises into reality. His promise was to get the drive and keep these people alive. The methods had to change. Now, the analytical part of his brain, the part that wrote 13 notebooks, kicked into overdrive. The chaos wasn't a failure. It was a new variable. An opportunity. New plan! He barked into the comms, his voice no longer hesitant but filled with a sudden, shocking authority. Harley! Forget the jukebox. They know you're there, so make it count. I want you to be the biggest, loudest, most destructive diversion you can possibly be. Draw every guard you can find to the east wing. Can you do that? There was a beat of silence, then Harley's delighted shriek. Can I? Honey, you just unlocked the bonus level. Woohoo! Time to make some mayhem. The sound of gunfire and maniacal laughter followed. Dead shot! Izuku commanded. Forget the comms tower. The mission is loud. I need you on Overwatch. The main plaza in the center of the ziggurat. It's their central muster point. I want you to suppress any hostiles attempting to cross that plaza to reinforce the east wing. Target heavy weapons and squad leaders first. Keep them pinned. Now you're talking sense, kid. Deadshot's voice was grimly satisfied. Engaging. The distant, suppressed thump of his sniper rifle was barely audible. King Shark! Izuku yelled. Snack time? Nano's voice rumbled hopefully from the VTOL. Yes. Snack time, Izuku said, a wild energy filling him. The west wall of the temple. It's a straight line from there to the central chamber. I need a new door. Go through it. A joyous, guttural roar echoed from the comms, followed by the sound of the VTOL's ramp opening and a massive splash. A moment later, a tremendous crunch of splintering stone and screaming men told them Nano had begun his work. That left Boomerang and Ratcatcher too. Izuku turned to them, his eyes blazing with green energy. We're moving. Now, he didn't bother with the submerged entrance. He leapt onto the first tier of the ziggurat, his feet barely touching the stone before he launched himself to the next. Black Whip tendrils shot from his arms, anchoring him, pulling him upwards with impossible speed. Boomerang and Ratcatcher stared up in awe. What about us, you show off? Boomerang yelled. Izuku landed on a ledge 50 feet up. He sent 2 thick strands of Black Whip rocketing down to them, wrapping securely around their waists. Hold on! He yelled, and pulled. They yelped as they were unceremoniously yanked into the air, soaring up the side of the temple. He deposited them roughly on the ledge beside him. Boomerang stumbled, his face pale. Little warning next time, mate! There's no time, Izuku said, already moving. He smashed through a stone window, the ancient masonry exploding outwards. He was inside. The corridors were filled with shouting Cobra cultists in red and black uniforms, armed with scimitars and submachine guns. They saw him and opened fire. Izuku became a whirlwind of green lightning. He used 8% of one for all, a manageable level that wouldn't shatter his bones but still made him a blur to the human eye. He didn't stop to fight them. He weaved through the hail of bullets, danger sense screaming, guiding his every duck and swerve. A tendril of black whip shot out, wrapped around the cultist's ankle, and yanked, sending a half-dozen of them tumbling down a flight of stairs like bowling pins. He grabbed Boomerang and Ratcatcher by the collars of their outfits. "Stay with me!" he ordered, and dragged them along as he ran, using his own body as a shield. "Dead shot status!" he yelled into his comm. "Plaza is a kill box," Lawton reported calmly. "They're trying to cross, but they're not getting far. Got a guy with a rocket launcher. Had. He's not a problem anymore." No! A muffled roar and the sound of chewing came over the comm. "Nom nom, crunchy," King Shark said. "Good. Keep going." They burst into a large chamber filled with ancient, priceless-looking artifacts. Golden snake idols, jewel-encrusted daggers, ceremonial masks. Boomerang's eyes went wide with greed. "Jackpot!" he breathed, slowing down. "Boomerang, no!" Izuku commanded. But the thief was already moving, snatching a golden cobra statue from its pedestal. The moment his fingers touched it, the floor gave way beneath him. It was a pressure plate. A volley of poison darts shot from hidden holes in the walls, aimed right at his unprotected back. Izuku's danger sense shrieked. He didn't have time to think. He pivoted on his heel, releasing Boomerang's collar. A thick cable of black whip shot out and wrapped around the Australian's torso, yanking him backward with bone-jarring force just as the darts whistled through the air where he'd been standing. Boomerang landed in a heap at Izuku's feet, the golden statue clattering beside him. He looked from the statue, to the holes in the wall, then up at Izuku, his face a mask of shock and confusion. You saved me," he stammered. "You were in my way." Izuku snarled, his face cold and hard. He grabbed Boomerang's coat and hauled him to his feet. "And you slowed us down? Touch another thing and I'll leave you here." The threat was empty. He could never do it, but it sounded terrifyingly real. Boomerang, for the first time, looked genuinely intimidated. He clutched his bag of boomerangs and nodded, staying close. The Deku effect, as Waller would later call it, was in full swing. He wasn't just fighting. He was a living nexus of battlefield control. He put himself in the path of the most danger, using his speed and power to draw enemy fire, creating openings for the others. He was the tip of the spear, the shield, and the strategist, all at once. He was turning a chaotic squad of individuals into a cohesive, destructive unit, not through trust or friendship, but by forcing them into roles where their worst impulses became assets. They finally reached the central chamber. It was a massive, circular room, the walls lined with humming, blinking server racks, a bizarre fusion of ancient stone and modern technology. In the center of the room, on a sacrificial altar, sat a single, reinforced hard drive connected by a thick bundle of cables. Standing before it was a tall, imposing figure in ornate, scaled armor, a hooded cloak obscuring his face. He held a wicked-looking ceremonial Chris dagger, its wavy blade coated in a viscous, dark green substance. This was the Cobra leader. He was not alone. He had a dozen of his personal guard, but more importantly, he had a hostage. He had one arm wrapped around Cleo's throat, the tip of the poisoned dagger pressed against her cheek. She had gotten separated in the chaos. "The little rat comes to me, her friends abandon her," the leader hissed, his voice like dry, rustling scales. "It is the law of nature. The strong survive. The weak are tools or food." Cleo was trembling, tears streaming down her face. Sebastian was chittering frantically on her shoulder. Boomerang skidded to a halt beside Izuku. "It's the rat girl," he breathed. Izuku's gaze hardened. He saw Achiko's face, her terror during the Shai Hasaikai raid. He saw Eri, small and helpless. He saw every person he had ever sworn to protect. The Cobra leader's eyes flicked to Izuku. "The Green One. You fight with the strength of many, yet you surround yourself with vermin. You seek to save the flawed, the weak. It is a fool's errand. Cobra will burn the weakness from the world, and from the ashes, a new, stronger order will rise." It was the same philosophy as Shigaraki. The same as All for One. The strong devouring the weak. A red haze of fury descended on Izuku. But he held it back. He couldn't unleash a full power smash here. The shockwave could kill Cleo, or bring the unstable ceiling down on them all. He had to be smart. Let her go, Izuku said, his voice dangerously low. The leader laughed. You are in no position to make demands. He's right, Boomerang muttered beside him. What's the play, kid? Izuku didn't answer. He took a single, deliberate step forward. The guards raised their weapons. Dead shot, Izuku said into his calm, his voice calm. I need a distraction. North wall of the central chamber. Now, a heartbeat later, a section of the stone wall high above the Cobra leader exploded inward, peppering the area with dust and shrapnel. It was a perfectly placed shot, causing no real damage, but creating a moment of pure chaos. In that moment, Izuku moved. He activated FA gene, releasing the stored energy in a single, explosive burst. He shot across the room, a green thunderbolt. He ignored the guards, their bullets seeming to move in slow motion. His target was the leader. The leader reacted fast, shoving Cleo aside and lunging at Izuku with the poisoned kriss. Izuku met him head-on. He didn't have All Might's overwhelming power, so he used his own skills. He parried the first strike with his reinforced boot, the blade scraping against the metal. He ducked under a slash, the wind of it rustling his hair. He was faster, stronger, but the leader was a skilled fighter, his movements fluid and serpentine. And he only needed to land one scratch. As the leader thrust the dagger toward his chest, Izuku saw an opening. He could dodge and counter, but it would be a prolonged fight. Cleo was still in the room, vulnerable. He had to end it. Now, he made a choice. Instead of dodging, he shifted his body slightly. The leader's eyes widened in triumph as his blade found purchase. The kriss plunged into Izuku's left shoulder, sinking deep. A fire unlike any pain he had ever known erupted in his body. It wasn't just the wound, it was the poison, a searing, arctic cold that spread through his veins, making his nerves scream and his muscles begin to lock up. His vision swam, but the leader was overextended. His weapon was caught in Izuku's flesh and muscle. He was trapped. Got you! Izuku grunted through a wave of agony. His right fist, already crackling with the green energy of One for All, came up in a brutal, efficient arc. It wasn't a smash. It was a precise, controlled 8% punch, aimed directly at the leader's jaw. The impact was sickening, a wet crunch that echoed in the chamber. The leader's head snapped back, his eyes rolled up, and he crumpled to the floor, unconscious before he even hit the ground. Izuku swayed, clutching his shoulder. Black blood, mingled with the green poison, oozed from the wound. The strength was rapidly draining from his body. The world was starting to blur at the edges. Kid! Boomerang shouted, rushing to his side. He stared at the wound, his crude demeanor gone, replaced by genuine alarm. Cleo scrambled over, her face pale with shock. You took it from me. Get the drive! Izuku gasped, stumbling. The poison was working fast. His limbs felt heavy, unresponsive. The humming of One for All was sputtering, fighting against the foreign agent in his system. Boomerang, surprisingly, acted without hesitation. He sprinted to the altar, ripped the data drive from its cradle, and shoved it into his bag. Got it! Let's go! The remaining guards, seeing their leader fall, let out furious roars and charged. Boomerang slung Izuku's good arm over his shoulder, trying to support his weight. I can't carry you and fight, mate! Don't have to! Izuku slurred. He looked at Cleo, at the dozens of rats that were now swarming into the room, drawn by her distress. Cleo, can you stop them? She looked at the charging guards, then at Izuku, his face pale and beaded with sweat. A flicker of resolve hardened her fearful expression. She raised her device, aimed it at the cultists, and pressed the button. A high-frequency wave, inaudible to human ears, pulsed through the room. The swarm of rats, their eyes glowing a faint red, turned as one and surged forward, a living tide of fur and teeth. They swarmed over the guards, biting, scratching, overwhelming them in a horrifying, squealing wave. Whoa! Boomerang breathed, looking impressed. Let's go! Izuku urged, his knees buckling. They half ran, half stumbled out of the chamber, leaving the guards to their fate. The world was a dizzying mess of tilting corridors and shouting voices. Izuku could feel his consciousness fraying, the poison and the strain of using OFA finally taking their toll. They burst out onto a high balcony just as the VTOL swooped down, its ramp already lowering. Deadshot was there, providing cover fire, while Harley cheered from the ramp, her face and bat spattered with something. King Shark was lumbering up the ramp, clutching a severed Naga arm like a turkey leg. "Get him on board!" Deadshot yelled. Boomerang and Cleo hauled Izuku onto the ramp. He collapsed onto the metal floor, his strength completely gone. The last thing he saw before his vision went black was the faces of the Suicide Squad. Harley's curious frown, Deadshot's grim appraisal, Boomerang's shocked concern, and Cleo's terrified, grateful eyes, all looking down at him. Then nothing. Darkness. Not the peaceful, dreamless void of proper sleep, but a thick, syrupy blackness teeming with phantom sensations. The ghost of searing cold still traced its way through his veins. Muffled sounds echoed in the abyss. The incessant, heavy drone of engines, the distant crackle of a radio, a low, guttural rumble that could have been thunder or a monster's sigh. Izuku's consciousness returned to him in painful fragments. The first sensation was a dull, throbbing ache that radiated from his left shoulder, a hot coal buried deep in his muscle and bone. The second was the rhythmic, almost imperceptible beep of a medical monitor somewhere to his right. The third was cold. He was lying on a surface as hard and unforgiving as a slab of morgue steel. Then, a fourth sensation, one that cut through the fog of pain and disorientation. A small, living warmth on his chest. A gentle weight that rose and fell with his own shallow breaths, accompanied by a faint, tickling vibration. His eyes snapped open. The light was a brutal, fluorescent glare, and he squeezed them shut again, a groan escaping his lips. He tried again, blinking rapidly, letting the world resolve itself into focus. He was in a cramped, metallic room, clearly the medbay of the VTOL jet. Wires and medical tubing snaked along the walls, and the air smelled sharply of antiseptic and ozone. He was shirtless, a heavy-duty bandage packed with some sort of translucent gel covering his shoulder. And 4-line was taped to his arm, feeding a clear fluid into his veins. He looked down. Perched on his sternum, its tiny claws nestled gently in the fabric of his torn undershirt, was a sleek brown rat. It was watching him with intelligent, black bead-like eyes, its whiskers twitching. Sebastian. As his gaze adjusted, he saw the rat wasn't alone. Sitting on a low stool beside his cot, hunched over with her knees drawn to her chest, was Cleo Keizo. Her rat-controlling device lay on the floor beside her. She wasn't looking at him, but at her own hands, twisting a loose thread on her jumpsuit. She looked even younger and more fragile under the harsh medical lighting. He tried to sit up, but a fresh wave of agony shot through his shoulder, and he fell back with a choked gasp. The movement caught her attention. Her head snapped up, her tired eyes widening. "You're awake," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the engine drone. Sebastian chittered and scurried up to nuzzle under Izuku's chin, the sensation startlingly gentle. Don't move," Cleo said quickly, half rising from her stool. "They gave you the antidote, but they said the poison was aggressive. Designed to cause massive cellular necrosis. You're supposed to rest." Izuku let his head fall back onto the thin pillow. His body felt heavy, hollowed out. The vibrant energy of One for All was a distant, flickering ember, barely there. He felt more corkless than he had in years. "Are you okay?" he managed to rasp, his throat dry and raw. "The leader, he didn't hurt you." Cleo stared at him, a profound confusion warring with fear in her expression. It was as if the question itself was a foreign concept. In her world, no one asked that, especially not after taking a poison blade for her. "No," she said, shaking her head. She looked down at her hands again. "No one's ever. You didn't have to do that. For me." The last two words were heavy with a lifetime of being overlooked, of being considered less than nothing. He was supposed to be an asset. A tool. A means to an end. In the cold calculus of their world, she was expendable. He had just proven that, to him at least, she wasn't. It's a hero's job to protect people, he said, the words tasting like a lie. He wasn't a hero anymore. He was Waller's soldier. But the instinct, the core programming of his soul, was impossible to erase. But I'm not a person, she mumbled, so quietly he almost didn't hear it. I'm a criminal. A freak who talks to rats. She gestured vaguely at the others in the main cabin, separated only by a thin curtain. We're the bad guys. Everyone deserves to be saved, he said, the conviction in his voice surprising even himself. He looked at her, truly looked at her. He saw the fear, the loneliness, the quiet desperation of someone who had been backed into a corner by life one too many times. He saw a victim, not a villain. A single tear traced a path down her cheek. She hastily wiped it away. Thank you, she whispered. It was a simple phrase, but it carried the weight of a world. It was the first genuine, human connection he had made since he'd stepped onto Waller's helicopter. It was a flicker of warmth in the crushing cold of his new reality. Sebastian chittered again and nudged a small, foil-wrapped object toward Izuku's hand. It was a nutrient bar, pilfered from someone's pack. A peace offering. Izuku managed a weak, tired smile, the first real smile in what felt like an eternity. This quiet, fragile moment was broken by the sound of heavy boots on the metal floor. The curtain was pulled aside. Floyd Lawton stood there, his ballistic mask pushed up on his forehead. He had a cleaning cloth in his hand and was methodically polishing one of his wrist cannons. His expression was unreadable, his eyes holding the cold, appraising look of a master craftsman examining a piece of equipment that had performed unexpectedly. Cleo flinched, immediately drawing into herself. She grabbed her device, murmured something to Sebastian, who scurried back to her shoulder, and scurried past Deadshot out of the med bay without another word. Deadshot watched her go, then his gaze fell back to Izuku. He walked in and stood over the cot, looking down at the bandaged wound. Neurotoxin from the cult of the Black Kiss, he stated, his voice a low, professional rumble. Nasty stuff. Seen a man die from a scratch. His insides turned to soup. You're lucky Waller keeps a full pharmacy on this bird. Izuku said nothing, merely watching him. He expected a reprimand, a sneer, a cynical comment about his recklessness. Instead, Deadshot leaned against the bulkhead, crossing his arms. He wasn't looking at Izuku, but at the far wall, as if replaying the mission in his head. Your plan was garbage, he said bluntly. Stealth with this crew? That was never gonna happen. You might as well have tried to teach King Shark to knit. Izuku's jaw tightened. He started to protest, but Lawton cut him off. But your second plan, he continued, his voice holding a new note of grudging respect. The one you pulled out of your ass mid-firefight, that was good. Using Quinn's chaos as a dedicated diversion, Nano as a battering ram, me on suppression. You saw the board change and you adapted. You turned our liabilities into assets. He finally looked at Izuku, his eyes sharp. Most commanders would have frozen. Or tried to force the original plan. They'd be dead. We'd be dead. This wasn't praise. It was a clinical assessment. A performance review from the deadliest man on the planet. Then you took the knife, Deadshot said, shaking his head slightly. That was stupid. Pure, uncut, grade A stupid. A field leader is the most valuable piece on the board. You don't trade yourself for a pawn. He saw the protest forming on Izuku's lips and held up a hand. But it was the right tactical call. The leader was skilled. A drawn-out fight would have risked the objective. You saw the fastest path to victory and you took it, cost be damned. It was a professional's move, hidden inside a hero's move. You got the job done. He pushed himself off the wall, his brief analysis complete. He turned to leave, then paused in the doorway. He looked back at Izuku, and for a moment, the professional mask slipped. Izuku saw a flicker of something else in his eyes, weariness, maybe even a hint of pity. The look of a man who had made too many impossible choices. Let me give you some advice, kid, Deadshot said, his voice low. This job, it's not about winning. It's about choosing how you lose. Waller will put you in rooms with no right answers. She'll give you 2 bad choices and tell you to pick one. That stunt you pulled? Taking the hit for the rat girl? You got lucky. Next time, it might be her or the mission. It might be one of us, or a bus full of nuns. He looked Izuku dead in the eye, his voice dropping to a near whisper, imbued with the cold, hard certainty of a man who knew this lesson in his bones. You can't save everyone, kid! You're not a god. You're just a man with a target on his back. The sooner you learn that, the better. All you can do is choose. You choose who you save first. He didn't wait for a response. He turned and disappeared through the curtain, leaving Izuku alone with the echoing weight of his words. You choose who you save first. He had chosen Cleo. But he had also chosen his friends back in Japan. He had sacrificed himself, his own morality, to save them. Deadshot's cynical advice was the very principle he was now living by. The realization made him feel sick to his stomach. The pain in his shoulder was nothing compared to the gnawing ache in his soul. He was still reeling from the conversation when the curtain was thrown open again, this time with a dramatic flare. Well, look who's joined the land of the living! Harley Quinn bounced into the med bay, her pigtails swinging. She was holding a half-eaten bag of chips in one hand and her baseball bat, still bearing faint, dark stains, in the other. She radiated a chaotic energy that was the polar opposite of Deadshot's grim professionalism. I was starting to think you were gonna sleep all the way back to Belle Reve. And miss my victory dance. It's got jazz hands and everything, she said, wiggling her fingers at him before stuffing a handful of chips into her mouth. Izuku just stared at her, his exhausted mind struggling to shift gears. She hopped onto the end of his cot, making the whole structure shake. He winced as a jolt went through his shoulder. Oops. Sorry, hero pudding. Still tender? She asked, peering at his bandage with a look of detached clinical interest. Nasty entry wound. Minimal tearing, though. Whoever stabbed you knew what they were doing. Probably aiming for the brachial artery. Lucky for you, you've got some dense muscle mass for a short stack. Her sudden shift from manic clown to competent medical analyst was deeply unnerving. Why are you calling me that? Izuku asked, bewildered. Hero pudding? Because you're all noble and good on the outside, but I'd bet on the inside you're just a big OL mess of guilt and anxiety, all mixed up and gooey. Like a pudding cup, a sad green pudding cup, she said cheerfully, as if this were a compliment. She leaned in closer, her bright, intelligent eyes scanning his face. That was quite a show you put on back there. First, the big, scary I'm in charge now routine. Very dominant, a little overcompensating, but effective. Then the big, brainy plan that went poof. And then the fun part. Her grin widened. You know, for a minute there, I thought you were just another Boy Scout. All don't kill, don't maim, let's talk about our feelings. So boring. But then, when it all went sideways, you didn't fold. You didn't even hesitate. She poked his good shoulder for emphasis. You looked at me, a certified agent of chaos, and instead of trying to put me back in my box, you aimed me like a cannon. You looked at Sharky and didn't see a monster, you saw a wrecking ball. You used us. All of us. For what we are, not what you wish we were. Izuku flinched. Used us. The word felt ugly, manipulative. It was exactly what he had done. And that little move you pulled on Digger? Harley cackled, slapping her knee. The air flick thing? Oh, that was beautiful. Not enough to kill him, just enough to humiliate him and put the fear of God into him. Calculated. Brutal. Efficient. She leaned in again, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, her playful demeanor vanishing, replaced by the sharp focus of the psychiatrist she once was. See, that's your whole deal, isn't it? That big OL martyr complex is working overtime. The I have to save everyone record is skipping in that big hero brain of yours. It's pathologically adorable, really, but underneath all that green and weepy, there's a real nasty piece of work in there, too. The part that counted the bullets. The part that timed Deadshot's distraction to the millisecond. The part that saw a poisoned blade and didn't just see a threat, but a tool to end a fight. She tapped his forehead with her finger. You're not a hero playing soldier, sweet cheeks. That's what Waller thinks you are. That's what you think you are. But I see it. You're a soldier who is desperately, tragically wishing he could still be a hero. Izuku felt completely exposed, as if she had peeled back his skin and was reading the frantic scribble of his thoughts. She saw the dichotomy that was tearing him apart. The all-might acolyte and the burgeoning battlefield commander, locked in a war for his soul. He couldn't breathe. Harley seemed to sense she'd pushed too far. She straightened up, her manic grin snapping back into place as if she were changing a mask. "Anyway, great work, boss," she chirped. 10 out of 10. Would cause mayhem for you again. Now, if you'll excuse me, I think Boomer stashed some mini vodkas in the life raft compartment, and I am feeling celebratory. With another bounce, she was gone, leaving behind the lingering smell of greasy potato chips and the deeply unsettling echo of her analysis. He was a soldier wishing he could be a hero. He couldn't have articulated his own internal crisis better himself. This team wasn't just a collection of killers. They were a collection of broken mirrors, and in each of them, he was starting to see a distorted reflection of himself. The VTOL landed with a heavy thud back at Belle Reve. The humid Louisiana air felt even more oppressive than before. Izuku, now dressed in a standard-issue gray prison jumpsuit that felt like sandpaper against his skin, was escorted directly from the landing pad. He was still weak, the antidote leaving him feeling washed out and brittle, but the guards flanking him showed no sympathy. He wasn't taken to the communal briefing room. Instead, he was brought to a small, windowless office. The walls were bare, gray concrete. The only furniture was a steel desk and 2 chairs. It was cold, stark, and utterly devoid of personality. It was Amanda Waller's sanctuary. She sat behind the desk, the retrieved data drive sitting in front of her like a trophy. She didn't tell him to sit. She let him stand there, swaying slightly from exhaustion, a prisoner awaiting judgment. "Mission successful," she began, her voice flat. She picked up the drive. "The data is intact. The chemical formula for the neurotoxin, their distribution network, their funding sources. All here. The higher-ups are pleased. You delivered." It was the most praise he was ever likely to get from her. It felt hollow. "However," she continued, her eyes cold and dark as a winter sea, fixing on him, "your methods were excessive and inefficient." Izuku blinked. "Inefficient? I got the objective. The entire squad is alive. You got lucky," Waller countered, leaning forward. Her voice was sharp, a weapon in its own right. "Your initial plan, while naively optimistic, was tactically sound. It failed within minutes due to your inability to control your assets. Then you improvised. A chaotic, high-risk, brute force assault that resulted in significant structural damage to the target site and the destruction of Cobra's secondary assets, which could have been captured and interrogated. Harley went off plan," Izuku argued, his own anger starting to burn through the fatigue. "I had to adapt to the situation. You are their leader, Mr. Midoriya. Their discipline is your responsibility. But that's not my primary concern." She steepled her fingers, her gaze intensifying. "My concern is the final engagement. You sustained a critical injury. You deliberately took a poisoned weapon to your primary shoulder. You, my most powerful and irreplaceable asset, took yourself out of commission to save Asset Keizo, a small-time thief whose only use is her control over vermin," her voice dripped with disdain. "That was a foolish, sentimental, and unnecessary risk. If that poison had been a slightly different composition, if the antidote hadn't been effective, I would be scraping you off the floor of my jet and shipping you back to your mother in a body bag. Your life is not yours to throw away. It is a resource. And you wasted it on a negligible variable." The dam inside him broke. The exhaustion, the pain, the guilt, the horror of the day, it all coalesced into a single point of defiant fury. "Unnecessary?" he shot back, taking a step forward. The guards behind him tensed, but he ignored them. "That was the only reason we succeeded. The Cobra leader was a trained fighter. If I'd gotten into a prolonged fight with him, the rest of his guards would have overwhelmed Boomerang and Ratcatcher. We would have been pinned down. We might have lost the drive. We might have all been killed. Taking the knife wasn't a sacrifice. It was a trade. My shoulder for a guaranteed, instant victory. It was the most efficient move on the board." He was throwing her own cold logic back in her face. He was speaking her language, and it wasn't just about the objective. He continued, his voice rising, filled with a passion he thought he had lost. You want this team to work? You want them to follow me into hell? They need to know I won't leave them behind. Deadshot respects the tactical choice. Boomerang is alive because I pulled him out of a trap. Ratcatcher knows I value her life. And Harley saw that I could let her be chaos and still win. That wasn't a negligible variable, that was building a team. It worked because I protected them. A long, heavy silence filled the room. Waller stared at him, her expression unreadable. For a moment, he thought he had finally broken through her icy exterior, that he had made her understand. Then she smirked. It was a tiny, chilling expression, devoid of any warmth or humor. It was the look of a scientist observing a particularly interesting reaction in a petri dish. An impressive theory, Mr. Midoriya, she said coolly. You believe you can foster loyalty in psychopaths through acts of self-endangerment. A bold hypothesis. We will see how it holds up under further testing. She stood up, the dismissal clear. The ideological battle was over, not with a victory or a defeat, but a postponement. She hadn't conceded his point. She had merely classified it as a data point for future observation. Your job is mission success, she stated, her voice returning to its default, authoritative flatness. It is not team building. It is not winning hearts and minds. It is results. You delivered a result today. Do not fail to deliver one tomorrow. She looked past him to the guards. Take him to his cell. I want him on nutrient drip and in medbay lockdown for 12 hours. I need my weapon functional. As the guards took his arms, Izuku looked back at her, his defiant anger solidifying into something colder, harder. A grim resolve. He hadn't changed her mind. But he had found his own. He knew the battle lines now. His war wasn't just against the monsters Waller would point him at. It was against her. A war of ideology, fought in the bloody trenches of every mission. They may be your assets, Warden, he said, his voice low but unwavering, echoing Deadshot's advice and Harley's analysis. But they are my responsibility. He met her cold gaze without flinching. I will save them, too. Waller's smirk widened by a fraction of a millimeter. Good luck with that, kid. The door slammed shut behind him, and he was left in the dark hallway, the weight of his impossible promise settling upon his wounded shoulders like a shroud. He was a soldier, just as Harley had said, but a hero's heart still beat stubbornly in his chest. And it was going to get every single one of them killed. Or it was going to be the one thing that brought them all back alive. He didn't know which. He only knew he had to try. The medbay's recycled air was stale, each breath a sterile reminder of his confinement. For 12 hours, Izuku had been a prisoner of his own recovery. The nutrient drip had restored his energy, but his mind had been a maelstrom. He replayed the Cobra mission 1,000 times, dissecting every choice, every bullet, every drop of blood. He saw the flicker of trust in Cleo's eyes, the grudging respect from Deadshot, the wild glee from Harley. He had saved them. He had used them. The two thoughts were a dissonant chord that resonated deep in his soul. The door to the medbay hissed open, not with the clatter of a guard, but with the quiet, authoritative presence of the warden herself. Amanda Waller stepped inside, the harsh fluorescent lights glinting off the screen of her ever-present tablet. She didn't ask how he was feeling. She didn't acknowledge the fresh, pink scar tissue on his shoulder. She looked at him the way a mechanic looks at a newly repaired engine. You're cleared for active duty, she stated, her voice as flat and cold as the steel walls. Good. Because your test run is over. It's time for the main event. Izuku pushed himself into a sitting position on the edge of the cot. The gray prison jumpsuit was coarse against his skin, a constant, abrasive reminder of his status. The brother eye protocol you mentioned? A symptom, not the disease, Waller corrected, her tone sharp. She tapped her tablet, and a holographic image flickered to life in the small room. It was the face of a man, handsome, with dark, intense eyes, a powerful jaw, and a faint, knowing smirk. He looked like a classical Roman statue brought to life, an image of timeless power and intelligence. But his eyes held a coldness that dwarfed even Waller's, a chilling emptiness that spoke of ages beyond human comprehension. Vandal savage, Waller said, her voice laced with a rare, almost imperceptible note of venomous respect. Born 50,000 years ago. A Cro-Magnon warrior bathed in the radiation of a mysterious meteor. It granted him a supergenius intellect, cellular regeneration, and effective immortality. He has been a pharaoh, a khan, a king, a Caesar, a general, a secret architect of human history. He believes humanity is a failed experiment, plagued by weakness, sentiment, and self-destruction. His goal, for the last 50 millennia, has been to burn the world down and rebuild it in his own image, with himself as its eternal god-king. Izuku stared at the image, a cold dread seeping into him. This wasn't a villain like Shigaraki, twisted by pain and ideology. This was something ancient, something that viewed all of human history as a prelude to his own ascension. He has spent centuries trying and failing, Waller continued. But recently, he acquired something new. Something not of this world. The image changed. It showed a complex, alien-looking device, a pulsating sphere of dark metal covered in glowing red circuitry, held within a massive gyroscopic frame. It looked both technological and organic, like a machine with a malevolent heart. Apocalyptic technology, Waller explained. Salvaged from one of Darkseid's failed invasions in another reality. We don't know how Savage got his hands on it. What we do know is what he's built with it. The hologram zoomed out, revealing the device at the center of a colossal facility, a labyrinth of power conduits and cooling systems, all housed within a mountain fortress. He calls it the Genesis engine. When activated, it will broadcast a planet-wide resonant frequency. Not sound, not radiation, but something far more insidious. A signal that will directly interface with the DNA of every living human on Earth. The implications hit Izuku with the force of a physical blow. Rewrite their DNA? He breathed, horrified. Precisely, Waller confirmed. It will forcibly trigger latent metagenes in some, creating an army of unstable, powerful beings loyal only to him. In others, it will accelerate genetic decay, causing rapid, agonizing death. It is eugenics on a planetary scale. A culling of the weak, as he calls it. Billions will die in a matter of hours. The survivors will be his slaves or his soldiers. The end of the world as we know it. The room felt suddenly very small, the air thick and hard to breathe. This was a threat on a scale he had never imagined. All for one sought to rule a broken world. Vandal Savage sought to unmake it entirely. Where is it? Izuku asked, his voice low and tight with urgency. A remote, uncharted island in the South Atlantic. A rogue state he has owned for centuries, Waller said, swiping the screen. A satellite image of a lush, mountainous island appeared. Corto Maltese. For the next 24 hours, the circular briefing room became Izuku Midoriya's entire universe. The rest of the squad was brought in, their usual crude banter and simmering hostility conspicuously absent as Waller laid out the apocalyptic stakes. The sheer scale of the threat had a sobering effect on even the most chaotic among them. Then Waller left, sealing the door behind her, leaving them alone with their new commander. Izuku stood before the central holographic table, which now displayed a constantly shifting array of data streams, satellite imagery of Corto Maltese, stolen architectural schematics of Savage's fortress, Jotunheim, thermal scans, geological surveys, and patrol routes extrapolated from long-range observation. The air hummed with the low thrum of the projector and the frantic energy of Izuku's mind. He didn't sleep. He barely ate, surviving on protein bars and caffeine that Cleo quietly left by his elbow when she thought he wasn't looking. He became a conduit for information, absorbing every bite, his eyes bloodshot, his hair a frantic mess. He muttered to himself, tracing lines on the holograms with his finger. His notebooks, miraculously procured by Waller, sprawled open around the table, new pages filling with his frenetic, detailed script. The rest of the squad watched this obsessive display with a mixture of awe and concern. At first, they kept their distance. Boomerang grumbled in a corner, Harley practiced card tricks, and King Shark napped. But slowly, they were drawn in. Deadshot was the first. He stood beside the table, arms crossed, silently observing. He, a master of angles and trajectories, recognized the work of another kind of genius. He saw Izuku discard and refine dozens of plans, running simulations in his head. He watched him map out not just guard patrols, but lines of sight, ricochet angles, potential structural weaknesses in the fortress walls. He saw a mind that processed the battlefield with the same cold, geometric precision he used to line up a shot from 2 miles away. The eastern approach is a no-go, Deadshot finally said, breaking the long silence. He pointed at the map. That ravine creates a natural kill box. They'll have it zeroed in. You'd need to be invisible to get through. Izuku didn't even look up. I know. I factored that in 3 hours ago. The thermals show hidden heat signatures in the rock walls. Automated turrets. We'd be shredded before we saw them. He swiped his hand, and the hologram changed, highlighting a new route. But the western cliff face has a geological fault line. An old lava tube, now flooded. It leads directly beneath the fortress's geothermal power plant. It's our best entry point. Deadshot raised an eyebrow, impressed. The kid wasn't just looking at the fortress. He was looking at the island itself as part of the battlefield. By the end of the day, Izuku had a plan. It was complex, multi-staged, and utterly insane. It was also, they all had to admit, brilliant. He finally looked up from the table, his eyes burning with an exhausted but focused intensity. This is it, he announced, his voice hoarse. This is how we do it. The squad gathered around the table. The final plan glowed in the center of the room. The Genesis engine is located in the top level of Jotunheim, but its power core is in the sub-level, fed by the geothermal plant. Destroying the engine itself is too risky. The Apocalyptian tech could have unknown defensive capabilities. But the power core, that's conventional. Volatile. We plant charges on the core, trigger a cascading overload, and the entire fortress, including the engine, will be vaporized. The blast will be contained by the mountain itself. He looked around the room, making eye contact with each of them. This mission requires 2 teams operating simultaneously. Team Alpha is diversion. Team Bravo is infiltration. We can't afford a repeat of the Cobra mission. Each team has a specific role, and you stick to it. No deviations. He pointed at Harley and King Shark. Team Alpha. Harley, no. Your objective is chaos. Pure, unadulterated chaos. Savage's primary garrison and armory are located on the far side of the island, here. He highlighted a sprawling military base on the eastern coast. You will be inserted 2 clicks south of their position. Your job is to be the biggest, loudest, most destructive force this island has ever seen. Draw the entire garrison. Make them think the main assault is on them. I want every soldier, every tank, every helicopter on that side of the island focused entirely on you. Harley's eyes lit up, a slow, wicked grin spreading across her face. This wasn't a leash, it was a license. He then turned to Deadshot and Captain Boomerang. While Team Alpha has their attention, the western side of the island will be on high alert, but with minimal personnel. Their primary defense is automated, specifically, a network of anti-air cannons that will shoot down our extraction VTOL if they're active. That's where you 2 come in. Deadshot, Boomerang. You'll be inserted on this ridge overlooking the western coastline. The A network is controlled from a single command bunker. Your job is to infiltrate that bunker and disable the network. It must be done before Team Bravo completes our objective, Boomerang grumbled. So me and the Tin Man get to play with wires while Sharky and the Psycho get to blow stuff up? Where's the fun in that? The fun is that we all get out of here alive, Izuku said, his tone sharp. And the system is complex. It will require Deadshot's precision and your specialized talent for disabling electronics with well-aimed projectiles. It was a thinly veiled compliment, but it hit its mark. Boomerang's chest puffed out slightly. He wasn't just a thug, he was a specialist. Finally, Izuku looked at Cleo, who was clutching her device, Sebastian twitching on her shoulder. That leaves us. Team Bravo. Me and you, Cleo. We go in through the flooded lava tube. It's tight, dark, and almost certainly trapped. I need your senses. Sebastian and his family will be our eyes and ears, scouting ahead for proximity mines, laser grids, and biological scanners. Once we're inside, we move through the maintenance tunnels to the geothermal core. We plant the charges and get to the extraction point. We are the ghosts. The quiet part of the plan. The room was silent. The plan was audacious. It relied on every member performing their part perfectly. It was a machine with 5 moving parts, and if any one of them failed, the whole thing would collapse. But unlike the Cobra mission, this plan didn't just give them orders, it gave them purpose. It weaponized their specific, often dysfunctional, talents. Before they could fully process it, Izuku began his final, and most crucial, phase of leadership. He dismissed them, telling them to get their gear ready. Then, he sought them out, one by one. He found Deadshot in Belle Reve's dilapidated firing range. The air smelled of cordite and rust. Lawton was practicing, firing his wrist cannons at targets 500 yards away. He wasn't just hitting the bullseye. He was grouping his shots so tightly they tore a single, ragged hole in the metal. Thwump. 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 Each shot a testament to his lethal perfection. Izuku stood by the doorway, waiting for him to finish the magazine. Deadshot ejected the empty clip and began reloading, his movements fluid and economical. "Your plan has 100 points of failure, kid," Lawton said without looking at him. "I know," Izuku replied, walking further into the range. "That's why I need to know my team can handle their specific point of failure without my supervision." He looked at the impossible groupings on the distant targets. The AA bunker. The schematics show it's hardened against conventional assault, but vulnerable to internal sabotage. Once you're inside, Waller will be locked out of our comms. You'll be on your own. I can't give you a step-by-step. I can only give you the objective. He stopped beside Lawton, meeting his gaze. "You gave me advice on the jet. You said this job is about choosing. I'm giving you tactical autonomy. The objective is to disable that network. How you do it, who you have to take down to get it done, that's your choice. You're the professional. I trust your judgment." Deadshot paused his reloading. He looked at Izuku, truly appraising him. This wasn't the bleeding heart idealist from the first briefing. This was a commander who understood the value of delegating to a master of his craft. He was showing respect not for the man, but for the skill. To Floyd Lawton, that meant more than any compliment. "And Boomerang?" Deadshot asked, a hint of skepticism in his voice. "You trust him?" "I trust that he's a scumbag who wants to live," Izuku said bluntly. "And I trust that you'll put a bullet in him if he tries to jeopardize the mission." "That's your choice, too." A slow, cold smile touched Deadshot's lips. It wasn't friendly, but it was a smile of understanding. "All right, kid. You got it. I'll handle the Aussie. You just worry about your part." He slammed the fresh magazine into his wrist cannon. The sound echoed in the range like a gavel falling. Agreement reached. He found Captain Boomerang in the mess hall, trying to use a sharpened spoon to jimmy open a vending machine. He was grumbling about the quality of Belle Reve's beer. "It's not gonna open, Harkness," Izuku said, startling him. Boomerang spun around, hiding the spoon. "Just lookin'. And it's Boomerang to you, Pipsqueak." "The entire network," Izuku said, getting straight to the point. "It's not just about flipping a switch. The control panels are shielded. According to the schematics, the only way to disable them without triggering a facility-wide lockdown is to simultaneously destroy 3 separate relay junctions. They're 12 feet up the wall, behind armored plating with half-inch wide thermal exhaust ports." Boomerang's greedy, cynical expression slowly shifted to one of professional interest. "Half-inch ports? From how far?" 30 yards. "In a room likely filled with enemy guards," Izuku said. "Deadshot can't do it. A bullet is too direct. The angle is wrong. It needs a projectile that can be persuaded, something that can hit a wall, ricochet up at a 40-degree angle, and hit a moving target the size of a coin." Boomerang slowly pulled out one of his custom rangs. It was perfectly weighted, its edge honed to a razor sharpness. He ran a thumb over its surface. "It's a show-off shot," Boomerang said, a cocky grin spreading across his face. "A bloody impossible one. You think I can make it?" "I think you're the only person on the planet who could," Izuku said. The flattery was thick, but it was also true. "You're not Deadshot's backup on this, Harkness. He's your backup. He's there to clear the rooms so you can do your work. The success of our extraction depends entirely on your skill." Boomerang's grin widened. He tossed the boomerang from hand to hand. Izuku had just appealed to the one thing Digger Harkness valued more than money, his own ego. He was being told he was the star, the linchpin. The mission was no longer a chore. It was a challenge. A chance to prove he was the best. All right, Greenie, Boomerang said, stuffing the rang back in his coat. You just make sure you're at that pickup point on time. I ain't waiting around. Harley Quinn's cell was a riot of color. She had used what looked like condiments from the mess hall to draw elaborate, psychedelic murals all over the concrete walls. She was sitting cross-legged on her cot, humming and sharpening the spikes on a custom-made grenade with a nail file. Knock knock, Izuku said from the doorway. Who's there? Harley chirped without looking up. The guy who's about to give you the biggest, brightest box of matches in the world, he replied. That got her attention. She looked up, her eyes gleaming with manic curiosity. I'm listening, Pudding, the Eastern Garrison. It's not just a distraction. It's a performance, Izuku said, stepping inside. He was speaking her language now. I'm not giving you a target. I'm giving you a stage. The armory is filled with experimental explosives. The motor pool is packed with fuel tankers. Savage's Officers' Club is a 3-story historical building he liberated from the British in the 18th century. It's filled with priceless, flammable antiques. He was painting a picture of glorious, epic destruction. Your only constraint, he continued, is to keep their attention focused on you. The louder, the brighter, the more spectacularly you fail to actually take the base, the better my part of the plan works. I need you to be a masterpiece of mayhem. A symphony of explosions. Think of it as the greatest show on Earth, and you're the star. Can you give me that? Harley slowly got to her feet. The nail file and grenade were forgotten. Her face was alight with a beatific, almost religious ecstasy. He wasn't trying to suppress her chaos. He was validating it. He was weaponizing her insanity and calling it art. He had given her permission to be completely and utterly herself. Oh, honey, she said, her voice dropping to an awe-filled whisper. She slung her arm around his shoulder. I'm gonna give you fireworks. King Shark's enclosure was a massive, semi-submerged pen, the water murky and cold. The demigod was floating on his back, humming a deep, monotonous tune. Izuku stood on the narrow walkway above the water. No, he called out. One black eye opened, regarding him impassively. Leader, Izuku knew complex explanations were useless here. He had to be direct, primal. He knelt down, closer to the water's surface. Harley is your friend. You fight with Harley, friend. Nano rumbled, seeming to like the word. You and Harley. Big fight, Izuku said, making an explosive gesture with his hands. Loud. Fun. Nano rolled over in the water, his massive head emerging. Fight. Fun, after the fight, Izuku said, leaning in, his voice dropping. The main objective. The big fortress. Jotunheim. He paused, letting the name sink in. Savage has guards there. Shark guards. King Shark went completely still. His head tilted, a flicker of genuine curiosity in his black eyes. Other sharks? Yes, Izuku confirmed. Genetically engineered. Big. Mean. But they are not you. They are not the son of a god. They are just monsters. When Team Alpha's job is done, if Team Bravo needs help, you will come, and you will have a big meal. He looked Nano in the eye, his expression deadly serious. You eat the other sharks, Nano. You show them who the real king is. A low, terrifying growl rumbled up from King Shark's chest. It wasn't a sound of anger, but of deep, primal satisfaction. A toothy, horrifying grin spread across his face. Izuku had not only given him a promise of food, but a challenge to his very identity. He wasn't just a hungry beast, he was a king defending his title. King! Nano rumbled, and smashed a fist into the water, sending a huge splash into the air. He was ready. He found Cleo in a quiet, forgotten corner of the maintenance level, sitting with Sebastian and a small family of other rats she had befriended. She was sharing a piece of a nutrient bar with them. She looked up as he approached, her default expression of fear firmly in place. Izuku sat on the floor a few feet away from her, not wanting to crowd her. "Are you ready?" he asked gently. She flinched. I don't know. A mission with just us? Stealth? What if I mess up? What if I slow you down?" "You won't," he said with absolute certainty. "Cleo, when we're in that tunnel, I'm basically blind and deaf. My quirks won't help me detect a pressure plate or a silent poison gas emitter. But you can. Through Sebastian, you can see in the dark, smell for traps, hear for movements I can't. You're not my backup. You're my senses. I literally can't do this mission without you." He was reframing her role. She wasn't the rat girl who was being dragged along. She was an essential specialist, a recon expert whose abilities were more valuable in this context than all of his power. "You're the one protecting me down there," he finished softly. "I'm just the muscle." She stared at him, her tired eyes wide. No one had ever called her essential before. No one had ever said they needed her. The fear in her face didn't vanish, but it was joined by something new, a fragile, flickering ember of self-worth. "Okay," she whispered, pulling Sebastian closer, as if for courage. "Okay. I can do that." The VTOL cut through the night sky, a silent black dart against the backdrop of a billion stars. Inside, the atmosphere was a stark contrast to the chaotic flight to the Cobra Temple. There was no bickering, no taunting. A heavy, professional silence filled the cabin. Harley was methodically applying her makeup, her movements precise, like a warrior painting her face for battle. Boomerang was meticulously checking the balance of each of his rangs. Deadshot sat perfectly still, his eyes closed, mentally rehearsing his part. King Shark watched the dark ocean pass below, his massive form exuding a calm, predatory patience. And Cleo, sitting next to Izuku, was whispering quietly to Sebastian, her fear now channeled into focus. They weren't a team. Not really. Not yet. They were a collection of broken, violent individuals. But for the first time, they were all pointing in the same direction. Izuku had taken their greed, their egos, their madness, and their fear, and he had forged them into weapons, each one honed for a specific purpose. The green light above the ramp flashed on. 5 minutes to insertion. Izuku looked at the faces of his squad. These murderers, thieves, and monsters. His responsibility. Waller's voice, cold and disembodied, crackled over their comms, a final, chilling reminder of who was truly in charge. "The board is set. The pieces are in motion. Do not disappoint me. Remember what happens to assets that depreciate in value." The comm went silent. Izuku stood up, his gaze sweeping over them. The boy who had inherited One for All was gone. The weeping child who dreamed of being like All Might was a distant memory. In his place stood a commander, his face grim, his eyes old, his shoulders bearing the impossible weight of saving a world that would never know his name, with an army he could never truly trust. "Let's go to work," he said. The ramp began to lower, revealing the dark, ominous silhouette of Corto Maltese against the horizon. The main event was about to begin.